Hello, welcome to Miniature Realms. My name's Stuart. Warlord Games have very kindly sent me even more stuff for Konflikt 47, which is very much the hotness at the moment. And I have one of the brand new Nachtzehrer miniatures. I thought it was a perfect excuse to go back to a very old technique and demonstrate some salt chipping.
Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Counter-Attack Bases. They stock a wide range of counters, gaming aids and movement trays for multiple game systems and offer custom items to suit your club, your event or even your podcast or YouTube channel. Check out the link in the video description.
I won't lie, as soon as I saw this appear in the newsletter and on social media, I was secretly hoping that Warlord would send me out a version of this to paint. You never know quite what I'm going to get sent. I can request things, but very shortly afterwards I had a notification that something was on the way from Warlord Games, and when I opened up the box it was one of these, and I was quite excited. I was definitely something that was right up my alley to paint. I love painted weather things, so thank you again, Warlord Games, for sending this out. It's not got a box at the moment. I didn't get any of the decals that come with it, but it does come with its assembly instructions this time around rather than a PDF version of them, and very nicely presented and really easy to follow they are as well. Everything's clearly labelled, everything's numbered very well, and I didn't have any issues at all following the instructions. There are frame or sprue, depending on what you want to call them, images on the website for pre-order at the time of recording this anyway. I know some people like to see them on screen as well. Everything's really nicely cast, no issues at all. And they remind me very much of their later plastic tanks. It's that kind of quality, or a little bit sort of early 2000s or late 2000s rather, Games Workshop quality stuff as well. It's very, very good stuff. Very, very easy to clean up. Not many mould lines, to be honest with you. It's mostly removing the contact points. And again, no issues with anything going together. Some of the parts are quite small. Some of the little rivet areas and things are quite tiny, so you do need to make sure that you keep an eye on that. But other than that, there's no more complicated than, as I say, one of their tank kits or any of their competitors' kits. Really, it's right up there with one of the best plastic kits you can get in the gaming world at the moment, especially World War II or World War II adjacent like this. So I've primed black with a rattle can, and then I'm going to be adding some layers of metallic paint. Now, I'm using an airbrush here. If you don't have an airbrush, there's a version of this paint job I'm going to do, which you can do with rattle cans. And what you'll do at this stage is choose a metallic rattle can of your favourite choice and brand and give your miniature a base layer with that all over. In many cases, you won't need to prime black beforehand, so you'll be skipping those stages. Also, at times we'll forget to say the name of the paint that I'm using. I will post up an image with all of the paints that I use on my Patreon, and that is for free patrons to view as well. So there's nothing stuck behind a paywall there. You will be able to look at it. Alternatively, if you pause the video, you can see what pots of paint that I'm holding up. Essentially, what I'm achieving with these 4 metallic paints that I'm using here is overcomplicating them beyond what you need to do, for sure. But I'm building up from a bronze colour all the way through to a light steel colour, and that's what I like to do for my steel looking colours. I really like the nice brown undertone you get from starting with that bronze, basically starting with a brown. You don't have to do that, as I've already said. You can go straight in with just one colour gunmetal rattle can, and it won't look an awful lot different if I'm really honest with you. Just a little bit in the recesses that gives you that extra depth, in my opinion. I like doing it. So I'm working base up as if I was painting this miniature just as a shiny metallic miniature. So I'm building up through the layers, I'm leaving brown in the recesses, and then as I move up to the higher, brighter colours of steel into the silvers, I'm adding that paint with my airbrush where the light would shine. So I'm making it look like a shiny, glossy steel or even chrome when you get to the top areas. Now we're going to cover an awful lot of this. I'm going to weather it all. So like I said, it doesn't matter too much, but because I don't know where that paint is going to be removed from yet, as part of the chipping method, I'm deciding the safest way to do it is to provide a full coat of metallic paint as if it was going to be a shiny steel thing, and it looks quite cool. Next stage is some gloss varnish to protect the paint a little bit. If you're not using an airbrush, you may be able to skip this stage. Metallic rattle can paints are pretty robust and it will take a lot of beating. You could add a rattle can varnish, but they're often a little bit too thick, so do be careful. And here we have the salts. We've got standard table salt and also some rock salt as well to give the slightly larger grain. It's a little bit too large, the stuff I've got here. And then to my airbrush, I am adding a little bit of water and a little bit of alcohol. And you can use rubbing alcohol for this. You can use just alcohol or just water if you don't want to have those things. And you don't need an airbrush. You can just squirt this on with a squirty bottle or paint it on with a brush as well if you wanted to. But essentially I'm making the miniature wet now, and the reason I've added the alcohol because it helps speed up the evaporation of the fluid afterwards. And then once you've got your wet miniature, just start sprinkling on your salt in little patches. You don't want to cover the whole thing because when you spray over the top afterwards, you remove the salt once it's dry, and that shows you your chipped area is what you're covering the salt with. So if you cover it all, obviously you're going to remove all the paint. So you want areas where there are paint still on there. The larger chunks are really nice to have sort of bigger chips and things, but as I said, that rock salt I've got is probably a little bit too large. Maybe I should have ground it down a little bit first, but enough of it sticks on. You can always squirt a little bit more of your solution or water on and do it stage by stage if you want as well. It's surprising how well it does stick on there, and once it's dry it looks a little bit like this. Now I'm going for a winter whitewash theme, a bit like one of the artworks in the studio paint job, which looks quite cool. I'm not just going straight for white though, I'm adding a layer of grey first. I'm pretty much covering the whole miniature. I'm not worried about the recesses too much. If I do miss a little bit, because I'm going to be rubbing so much of this paint back off, it'll all add to that super dirty, battle hardened, weathered look which we're after. So I'm just kind of nice thin layer all over. It just gives a nicer base for the white, will make the white look a little bit fuller, and in some areas there'll be a little bit of grey showing as well, which you would show through a bit of normal paint. So all in all, adding a grey first is great. Again, if you're a rattle can user here, this is where you'd just spray with your white colour if you wanted to do it in white for winter. If you wanted to go for a normal colour, you'd pick your field grey or whatever it happens to be. So you'd skip straight from the silver, salt, and then the rattle can stage, and then after the airbrush stage is here, everything else we'll be able to do regardless of whether you've got an airbrush or not. You can see here I'm just building up with the white, giving it some highlights, making it a little bit more transitional in places, and then it's the really fun part. And you don't have to wait for your paint to fully dry to do this. Start scrubbing away that salt with a fairly firm bristle brush. So I'm using the toothbrush, is the perfect thing for it. Sometimes it gets a little bit stuck on, so I just dip it in a little bit of clean water and it comes off as well. And that's why you want to make sure your paint is dry enough. Now it doesn't matter if a little bit of the paint comes off where there isn't salt. Again, that will just look like weathering. For those of you who have used chipping fluid or the old school way of doing it with hairspray, this is a very similar thing, but by adding the salt here, it's just another method that you could use. Sometimes I've even combined the hairspray and the salt method as well, because you get a really nice shaped effect from those chunks of salt, and you can leave the hairspray and don't have to remove it everywhere. But anyway, that's a different method for another time. But I'm scrubbing away here, and I've sped it up. I'm not really going at it this hard. I'm just being careful not to take the paint back to the black, to the undercoat, to the prime, but metallic paints are generally quite robust. And remember, I did add a little bit of varnish as well. So scrubbing away, in some places using a smaller brush to get into the little gaps and recesses, but what you're left with at the end is a miniature where you've got this white paint that's been scratched and chipped away, leaving the undertones of metallic showing through. And I think it's such a cool looking effect. Now at this stage I am adding a gloss varnish again with the airbrush in order to aid the application of some transfer, some decals. But however, again, if you're not an airbrush user, you can completely skip this stage, or you can give it your usual varnish that you would do at this stage for one of your miniatures, whether it's one of your matte or something like that. Again, gloss can be a little bit thick, unfortunately, with rattle cans quite often, but it just really helps you get your decals to fit nice and snug to the miniature using Microsol and Microset. I will pop a link in the video description now for a nice quick tutorial of how to apply decals if you've not done it before. And then once they were completely dry, because everything else is chipped, we don't want them to look perfect either. So before I put any more varnish on them, I'm just using the end of a sharp blade just to scrape away a little bit of the decals, just covering all the different pronunciations from different parts of the world, because I know it winds people up when I say decals, and water transfers, etc. Just scraping it off to look like scratches, look like that's chipped with the paintwork as well, and it works really well until you've sealed them. Now at this stage I've decided to seal them with a satin varnish. I don't want to dull the metallic areas too much using a matte. Again, it's a personal choice thing, it's totally up to you what you would do at this stage. If you're not an airbrush user, you may have your own methods for adding transfers and sealing them afterwards. But as I said, the link there that I supplied is probably the best practice way of doing it in terms of getting the smoothest finish. But you know, do whatever is best for you with the equipment you have. I glued the crew member in at assembly because I knew I was going to do this paint scheme and he would end up pretty white or grayscale by this point, so I knew it would be a perfect base for using speed paints, and in this case a lot of AK quick gen paints. If you're spraying metallic paint because you haven't got an airbrush, then maybe glue your crew member in afterwards and paint him separately. So I'm keeping the paint job quite simple here, using the right colours in big inverted commas from that AK quick gen military range, which is really cool. There is a review on the channel. I tried to remember to pop a link in, and I'm just picking appropriate colours to match the studio paint schemes, if I'm honest, in using that as a little bit of a guide. I'm following up with some very simple layering highlights. I'm just focusing on the areas that look like natural highlights because of using that quick gem paint. The whole point of them is you're going over a light coat, the dark in the recesses becomes your shadow, and then your highlight is naturally shown by the raised areas, and you can just tidy it up by using those lines and colouring them in many ways with slightly lighter colours. So I just find them in my range that matches those colours and just sort of spruce it up a little bit. You really don't have to, especially with a weathered thing like this. It's so small your eye is drawn elsewhere, but I like to go back and tidy it a little bit and give it a little bit of a top highlight, make it pop and make it stand out a little bit more. And like I said, all of these paints, if you want to copy them, you can pause the screen at any point, or you can just check them out on the Patreon a little bit and later on. But they didn't take me very long at all. I probably only spent about 10 minutes just quickly painting the crewmen here. Now back to some more weathering fun, and I'm using a ready mixed oil wash here. You could use your own panel liners. If you use those from AK, they're very good for this. You can use your own oil washes if you wanted to mix them. This is quite a sepia colour that's quite nice with the white. I'm really just placing it into the recesses and letting it run into all those recesses. And then once it evaporates and dries, it looks really grimy and dirty, but it also adds just a little bit of shade and definition to all those parts as well. So fun to do. It always looks fantastic over sort of a light grey or white colours as well. Really stands out. So I'm just having lots of fun at this stage, knowing that because it's an oil paint, I can go back afterwards and tidy it up a little bit. With a standard wash, you can't do that. Once it dries, it dries, and to tidy it up, you have to go back with that top colour, which really doesn't work with this kind of paint job. We've done all that salt chipping. It's very hard then to touch up the paint without getting the colours wrong, especially if I used an airbrush in this colour. If you're using rattle cans, you might struggle to colour match it. So using an oil paint like this is absolutely perfect, and the varnish that's on there is just helping protect that a little bit as well. It takes a little bit of time to go around adding it into all of those recesses. Don't worry if, like I've said, it splashes out onto the flatter areas a little bit, because the next stage is going to be cleaning up and tidying it up where we don't want it. And for that, I like to use AK fast drying thinner. You can use Sansador, anything artist based, anything mineral spirits based. Just stay away from your DIY kind of white spirits, because they really will just strip all the paint back off the miniature. And we've been chipping the paint off. You definitely don't want to take it all back off and undo all your work. So you can see I'm using a cotton bud here with a little bit on there, and I'm just wiping away anywhere that it's got on the flat surfaces. It looks a bit like a smear, a tired mark. So I want to leave it in those recesses and make it look like dirt and grime, but I don't want to make it look like there's painter's run or something like that, and your eye will tell you where it needs to be tidied up and where it doesn't. For the little pipes on the end of the big spiky arms at the front, I've just taken the cue again from the studio paint job. They're a kind of greenish colour. I've I've gone a little bit dull, a little bit more desaturated. I'm just using this contrast paint, and I'm almost glazing it on, and because it's quite thin, it's showing up all of the weathering and things underneath, which looks like it's then on the top, which is perfect. It means I don't need to go back and do it afterwards, but it just gives a little bit of colour focus, something that stands out a little bit different from the rest of it. You can paint them any colour you want, really. You could paint them brown or even black hosing or something like that, but I think that looks quite cool with this green. And then it's on to adding some rust, and you probably don't need to add lots of rust. This metal maybe wouldn't go that rusty that quickly, but it's fun, and judging by how damaged and battle weary and worn the rest of it is, it just looks so good to add some extra rust on, especially when you've got such a nice light grey white colour like this. Really stands out, really pops, and just breaks it up a little bit so it doesn't look too white when you look at it from a distance. So I'm just having a little bit of fun with this rust effect, and this is one of my favourite rust effects. The dirty down rust is brilliant. It's water soluble. You still want to use old brushes though if you haven't picked it up before. It's not cheap, but it lasts forever, and you can add little areas, paint on streaks, add water to blend it and feather it out. Then once it's dry, you can add more back, and it really builds up the intensity there, just like it would if you've got a really strong area of bright orange rust. But when you feather it out and thin it, it looks like that lighter rust as well. So it's actually really quite versatile. Love it. Favourite rust effect I've ever used for sure. Very much onto the final touches now, and I often like to do this with heavily weathered tanks and machinery. I'm just adding a very light dry brush to some of the edges that would be worn the most of a bright silver. It just reflects the edges where the paint would be worn off. Acts a little bit like an edge highlight, so gives it some definition, gives it some pop. And it just sort of brightens it up a little bit. You don't want to overdo it. You also don't want to get this paint on the flat areas and all over the white. You're really catching the rough, sharp edges of the miniature, and maybe towards the legs a little bit there where the paint will be worn off walking over rocky ground and areas like that. But I think it just makes it pop a little bit more, makes it stand out a little bit more. And I like to do this after the rust as well, because it just tones that down just slightly. And the final touch is some mud effect. This is European mud from Vallejo. This is more of an effect than a basing texture. And what this does really just makes it look like you've been walking through some wet mud. There's no base for this. The miniature when you buy it comes with a base. I don't know the size. It just comes with a base, so I don't know whether the base size matters that much. So I've left it off a base for now. At some point in the future we'll create a base for it, and a really beautiful snow base here would look fantastic and really finish the miniature off. Obviously I haven't done that. Just added a little bit of effects there to add a red glow from the lens and from the cockpit. I think the old red light in there would look pretty cool, and I've had loads of fun doing this. I just love painting weathered kits like this. So hopefully you like it, and you're going to let me know in the comments what you think. But thank you to Warlord for sending that out, because it's been lots of fun to do. It didn't take that long. I think the whole kit from prime to finish probably took me about 4 hours to paint, which wasn't an awful lot, and some of that was just sort of drying time or speeding up the drying with a hairdryer, because there's so little detail that needs picking out when you paint like this. When you paint a Games Workshop miniature like this, there'll be extra details all over the place that need painting, but this is very much like a real world military piece of kit where everything's painted the same colour for the obvious camouflage reasons, and it actually speeds up the process. And there's plenty of detail on this kit, but there's definitely not too much detail, so they're quite quick to build and quite quick to paint, which is always good when you're trying to get armies on the table. And yeah, I had lots of fun with it. Let me know what you think. Well, thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. I always have fun painting weathered tanks, or tank adjacent in this case, machines and things. It's so much fun. It's so much fun to get the airbrush out and weather stuff and really be grim and dirty and grimy. So hopefully you've enjoyed the video, seen some techniques that you've no doubt seen from me before, but also seen some new things. And I think it's the first time that I've shown off the salt chipping method on the channel. It's, like I said in the video, it's a very old method. It's been around for many years, and you've lots of new tools to use this now. But if you're someone who watches my videos and doesn't have all the equipment I have, then maybe it's something that you can do a little bit easier at home than some of the kit and things things that I would normally use. So let me know in the comments what you think. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and I'll continue to paint things on the channel that are from lots of different games systems, and hopefully you can get some enjoyment for those, even if you don't like all the games that I do cover on the channel. If you'd like to support me and the channel to keep making all these different varied painting tutorials and videos, then please do check out my Patreon. It's the very best way you can support me, enable me to keep making videos like this. They take time to film and to paint and all the rest that comes with it, so that the financial support that I get from my patrons really keeps the lights on at the channel. So if you are able to support me, I would really appreciate it. Also check out the channel sponsor, Counter Attack Bases. They make loads of gaming aids and custom dice as well. But thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.